how does a world end? It's not always with a single giant explosion. Sometimes it's with a sound, the sound of something ancient breaking against something new. Today, we're diving into one of those exact moments, the fall of Constantinople. And this isn't just a story about a siege. It's the story of a clash between a wall that was thought to be unbreakable and a terrifying new weapon that would change war forever. Let's get into it. Okay, so I want you to imagine something. You're inside the city, you've been under siege for weeks. It's grinding, it's exhausting. It's the night of May 22nd, 1453. You look up at the sky, maybe searching for some kind of hope, but what you see instead feels like the beginning of the end. The full moon, which should be this bright symbol of constancy, starts to vanish. A shadow just creeps across its face, turning it this dark, kind of ominous red. The very light that lit up your legendary walls is just being snuffed out piece by piece, right in front of you. Now today, we know exactly what this is, right? It's a lunar eclipse, a totally predictable alignment of the sun, earth, and moon. But in the 15th century, this was something else entirely. There was an old prophecy that said the city, the heir to the Roman Empire, would only fall when the moon gave a dark sign. For the defenders, already exhausted, this wasn't science. This felt like God himself turning his back on them. And that psychological blow was just devastating. Because for a millennium, their city was supposed to be eternal. It was the center of the world, protected by faith and by stone. So what was different this time? What had changed down on the ground that made this omen in the sky feel so final? Well, to understand that, we have to talk about the city's greatest defense, the legendary Theodosian Walls. And look, these weren't just any walls. They were a symbol. They were a statement in stone that had stood for 1,000 years. They were, basically, the empire's idea of permanence, made real. And you can see here why they were so legendary. This was a brilliantly engineered, 3-layer defense system. First, an attacker had to get across a huge moat. Then, they had to somehow get over a low outer wall, all while being shot at from above. And even if they did all that, they came face to face with the real deal, the massive inner wall, over 12 meters high and 5 meters thick, with almost 100 towers. It was an absolute marvel. And the thing is, they worked. For centuries, the most powerful armies in the world had just broken themselves against these things. We're talking Attila the Hun. He turned back. Huge armies from the Arab caliphates, they failed. The Rus warriors repelled again and again. Nobody had ever managed to breach them by force. But in 1453, the young, incredibly ambitious Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, showed up with more than just a big army. He brought an idea. He brought a technology that was about to completely rewrite the rules of war. He brought gunpowder on a scale nobody had ever witnessed before. And at the very heart of this new kind of war was one single, terrifying weapon. A great cannon, a bombard so huge it was almost mythical. This wasn't just another catapult, this was a machine specifically designed to make 1,000 years of military strategy totally irrelevant. Now, what's so wild about this is the irony. The guy who created this cannon, an engineer named Orban, he actually offered his services to the Byzantines first. But the empire, once so mighty, was basically broke. They couldn't afford him. So Orban takes his game-changing idea to Sultan Mehmed, who immediately gets it and gives him anything he needs. And the result was this monster of bronze. Just try to wrap your head around this number, nearly 8 meters long. That's not really a weapon. It's more like a piece of architecture designed to fire. The scale was just unprecedented. And because it was so huge, just moving it was a nightmare. It was so incredibly heavy that it took a team of 60 oxen and hundreds of men just to drag the thing across the country, sometimes only moving a few kilometers a day. The journey to the battle was an epic mission in itself. So here's the crucial thing to understand. Its power wasn't just in the giant stone cannonball. When this thing fired, the ground shook. The sound was like a crack of thunder that rolled across the land for miles. It was pure psychological warfare, designed to shatter your will to fight just as much as it shattered stone. And so the siege began. For 48 days, that giant cannon and its smaller siblings just hammered the same sections of the Theodosian Walls, over and over.
This was a new kind of fight, not of maneuver and tactics, but of pure grinding attrition. Industrial power versus ancient strength. And this slide just shows you the two eras colliding perfectly. You have the defenders, fighting with everything they had. Every night they'd rush out to the breaches, desperately trying to patch these massive holes with rubble, wood, even barrels full of dirt. But all the attackers had to do was reload with more gunpowder.
There was an eyewitness there, a surgeon named Niccolò Barbaro, and he wrote about the sheer exhaustion. The constant bombardment meant no one could sleep. There was no rest, no quiet. The defenders weren't just being beaten by force. They were being systematically worn down by the endless noise and destruction. And then on May 29th, the final assault came. Waves of Ottoman troops poured toward the weakened spots in the wall. In the middle of all that chaos, the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, is said to have ripped off his royal symbols and charged right into the thick of the fighting. He was never seen again. He just vanished, along with his empire. But the story doesn't really end with the noise of the battle. It ends in this deep, profound silence. After the city had fallen, Sultan Mehmed made his way to the very heart of the empire he had just conquered, the great palace of the Caesars. He wasn't met with riches and splendor. He walked through these desolate, ruined halls, damaged from the siege, open to the sky. The center of power for over 1,000 years was now just an empty shell, a ghost of a building. And tradition says that in this moment, standing in the quiet ruin, the 21-year-old conqueror recited this incredibly poignant line of Persian poetry. And it's not a boast about his victory. It's a reflection on how all power fades, how even the greatest empires eventually just become homes for spiders and owls. And if you go to Istanbul today, you can still see them. The broken, weathered ruins of those walls are still there, surrounded by the traffic and noise of a modern city. They're not a defense anymore. They're a monument. A monument to the exact moment that everything changed. And this, right here, this is the key takeaway of the whole story. What does it mean for something to become obsolete? It's this. It's that moment when one new invention, in this case massive cannons, makes 1,000 years of strategy, engineering, and what you thought was military certainty completely and utterly meaningless. So we're left with this big question. How does one age of history actually end and a new one begin? Well, sometimes it's not with a new king or a treaty. Sometimes it's with the roar of a cannon against a stone wall, a sound that echoes until the old world finally and completely falls silent.